Now, as we move forward into the future with Quest, it is time for me to probably give a bit of a eulogy for Gear VR. I am, it's been announced that that it's not going to be available on the future Samsung phones. So while it's currently the software is fully supported, the days are numbered. And I do think that we missed an opportunity here. I invested a whole lot of effort into it, and it's the foundation that we've built all the mobile things off of. But looking back, it's clear that we had huge unit volumes. I mean, I put in a request for Samsung for me to be able to actually say the number of headsets and activations, and they declined. But it's a large number. It's much larger than all of our other headsets. And it had good reviews. People liked it, but it was not retentive. I mean, the retention, we have Quest up here, Rift S, Rift, Go, and then Gear VR is way lower. So it was the kind of the classic leaky bucket that growth companies are advised not to pour effort into, where we did pour a lot of money into the content there. There were significant amounts of money that was spent on content, and when I would look at a spreadsheet of where all of it went and some of the apps that did almost nothing, it's kind of sad to see that the money didn't really wind up getting much in the way of returns there. Sometimes I would complain that I felt I didn't have as much support internally, that everybody was much more excited about Rift and standalones and so on. But there's a clear lesson here with this stark contrast of how much retention that we have on the same content on Go. And this really speaks again to the importance of friction in getting into the experience, where we had other theories like early on the overheats were a problem, but in retrospect, the people that were overheating their phones into VR were playing VR and were having a good time, and that wasn't really driving them away. There were concerns about people draining their battery. That's still an issue. People get anxious when they're kind of draining their phone battery, which is their lifeline to the internet and everything. But far and away, I think the biggest issue was just the friction of getting into it. And I like to think that if you could magically hold your phone up in front of your face and it just transformed into a VR headset, we'd have like 95% retention and it would be super amazing. But if you have to pop your phone out of its phone case and dock it into a Gear VR and put it on, you will use it twice. And we have lots of signal of people essentially doing that. Now, there's things that we could imagine doing to make it a better experience. The docking was fiddly, the mounting was fiddly. There's all sorts of software things that we could have done a lot better. And in fact, I think Daydream's holder was a little bit better than the Gear VR holder because it just let the phone fit in. It didn't have any active electronics on there. They sacrificed not having a touchpad or not having an integrated IMU for being a little bit more drop-in and kind of stretchy strap the thing around there. We could have conceivably made a phone holder that, if we knew the specific size of the phone, we could protrude the eye cups a little bit so it would still work with a case. It'd be heavier there and worse ergonomic experience, but we could have at least made it work to kill out that awful friction. Where, again, if the lessons we learned from this is it's almost always better to trade things to make it easier and faster to get into the experience. Now, some of the other things that we had to compromise on as we supported broader and broader ranges of phones, the holder got less and less optimal for any specific one. The very first Gear VR with the Note 4, that slotted in nicer, and it seemed to just generally feel a little bit better than the later universal holders that handled everything from the tiny little A-series phones up to the giant Note phones. And it also meant compromises where, to let the tiny phones fit in there, we had to crop down the edges of the eye cups, where the Notes and big Galaxies could have had a wider field of view there and generally worked better. So, maybe the phone holder friction really was just insurmountable, but there were a few other directions that we might have tried. One path was that really early on, we had solid data showing that people playing games with joypads were having a better time, much more retentive, much more time spent, and all of that. We knew that the little touchpad was just not a great gaming interface, although it's interesting now on the later systems, sometimes if you just want to watch Netflix, you kind of regret not having the little touchpad there and having to fumble for a controller at some point. But clearly it wasn't good for long-form entertainment experiences. So we talked a lot about just make a gamepad the default controller there, because not only would that let you do good VR games, it would give us the possibility of leaning into traditional Android gaming in various ways. If you just said this was Android on a big screen for a lot of things, and you could play Fortnite in your giant VR room, that would have some significant value. Now, we actually got fairly far along with this to the point of having some prototypes built, and they were neat. Like another company had done this, but they slot in kind of in the front where the phone goes, so it's kind of a combination lens protector as well as the actual joypad holder. But the problem was we had designed a simplified gamepad controller because internally there was this thought that full-on gamepads were too complicated for the broad consumer base. And I'm pretty sure I can track some of this to an early story where Brendan was raising funds early on in Oculus, and he was talking to some older investor, venture capitalist, demoing DK1 stuff, and hands him a game controller, and it was clear the old guy had never held like an Xbox controller in his life. And I think that scarred Brendan and influenced our strategy for a while there. But the nail in the coffin was it couldn't play Minecraft. It didn't have enough buttons to play Minecraft, so what was the point of doing that controller? And we wound up doing the pointer controller, which works out reasonably well for VR and was a reasonable path towards eventually having the 6 Degree of Freedom controllers. But that was one of the paths not taken. And the other major one would have been actually nailing all the immersive video or immersive media in general right. The whole 360 photos, 180 VR, 360 VR, all of this, there's enough value there, and it frustrates me because we just have not stirred that pot correctly. I mean, why don't we have the Instagram of immersive media? We have so much stuff that people are amazed when they see it, or when they see it running in the quality that it should be in, and it just seems like we've had stuff sitting on the table that we just haven't really picked up. And there's, like, the cameras have made amazing strides. I feel guilty about this, where the cameras have gone from the very first Ricoh Theta to, the push-button 5K, 60 frames per second cameras that are available now. Just massive progress there, where we've done very little on the content production, presentation, distribution, sharing side of things for that. And we still have to solve all of that for our big headsets. So, I mean, despite whether gaming and entertainment, whatever is the majority application, immersive media is absolutely one of the top 3 applications. And we had one prototype headset that might have been significant for this, where we had one headset built with these custom super wide-angle lenses that could use the full width of one of the Note or Galaxy phones. And watching, Henry or Dear Angelica or some of the Felix and Paul things, the very well-produced media, it was really pretty amazing with that. And it would have been a little bit more expensive, but that's another one of the data points that we've learned as we've done some of these product experiments, where at some point, when we're in tens of millions of users, all the very low price points are really going to matter. But as we've seen now, Gear VR went from 99 to 129 with the controller, and it really didn't do much of anything to any of the curves for adoption. So, and the last kind of direction that got talked about a lot in the kind of waning days of this was doing some kind of a more sophisticated plug-in headset. The idea being that, okay, docking the phone is a complete pain. It's the huge friction point, especially if you've got a case. What if you just kind of wired it down to your phone? And that has, like, on the one hand, you say, well, you could just plug a Rift S into a phone, write all the right software, and drive it there. But it doesn't feel right to me. I mean, people have different opinions on this, but at that point, you're back to the very earliest days of Gear VR with something that just barely works, overheats all the time, drains the battery down a whole lot. I was actually more excited about the possibility of doing an ultra lightweight, super comfortable headset, really lean in on something that you felt like you could wear for hours on end, and just had a better screen. If you just had a better screen and it was, kind of like a Super Go plugged into your phone, I thought that could still be, be useful.